The new Z28 DOHC V6 engine with a 60-degree cylinder angle is manufactured entirely in aluminium. Two overhead camshafts control the 4 valves per cylinder via roller cam followers with hydraulic valve lifters. The intake side has continuously adjustable camshafts. The camshafts are driven by the crankshaft via 3 timing chains. To provide high torque over a wide range of speeds, the engine has a turbocharger with a double-flow turbine housing. The air supply is regulated via an electronic throttle valve. The combination of the controllable valve overlap, produced by the variable camshaft adjustment, and the air control via the turbocharger makes it possible to dispense with an external exhaust gas recirculation system. The engine management system, Trionic ME 9.6 from Bosch, is available in 2 different software variations. The Z28NEL possesses 169 kilowatts or 230 horsepower and 330 newton meters. The Z28NET possesses 188 kilowatts or 255 horsepower and 350 newton meters. The engine is fitted in the Vectra C and the Signum. To remove the timing case cover of the Z28, disconnect the battery. Disconnect the wiring harness plug for the mass airflow meter. Detach the intake pipe for the secondary air system. And remove the air cleaner housing with air intake pipe. Remove the upper engine cover. Disconnect the wiring harness plug for the air pressure sensor. Unclip the line for the power steering. And detach the charge air pipe. Remove the coolant return line. At the engine control unit, disconnect the wiring harness plug for the body wiring harness and the engine wiring harness. Detach the earth connection. To remove the engine wiring harness bracket, disconnect the wiring harness plug for the atmospheric pressure sensor. Unscrew the nuts. Disconnect the wiring harness plug for the intake pipe sensor and set the wiring trough aside. Unclip the wiring harness plug for the intake pipe pressure sensor. Unscrew the screws and remove the bracket for the engine wiring harness. Detach the vacuum line from the upper part of the intake manifold. Unscrew the bolt and detach the bracket with the crankcase vent lines. Detach the wiring harness bracket for the injectors. Remove the 6 bolts for the upper part of the intake manifold. Lift off the upper part of the intake manifold and disconnect the throttle valve module wiring harness. Lift off the gaskets for the upper part of the intake manifold. Remove the tank vent valve with lines. Relieve the fuel pressure with KMJ 34730-91 and disconnect the fuel supply line. Unscrew the bolt from the power steering reservoir. Remove the return hose, seal it, and set aside the power steering reservoir. From the cylinder head of cylinders 135, disconnect the wiring harness plug for the camshaft sensor, disconnect the camshaft adjustment valve, and unclip the bracket. Disconnect the wiring harness plug for the fuel pressure sensor, and from the cylinder head of cylinders 246, disconnect the camshaft sensor wiring harness plug and the camshaft adjustment valve and unclip the bracket. Remove the ignition modules from both cylinder banks. Disconnect the wiring harness plugs for the injectors. Unscrew the 3 fastening bolts for the fuel distributor pipe and remove the fuel distributor pipe with injectors. Unscrew the 2 bolts. And remove the lower part of the intake manifold. Seal the intake ducts. Release the engine control unit earth cable from the wiring harness. Remove the battery and the battery support. At the turbocharger, disconnect the wiring harness for the solenoid valve bypass. Disconnect the charge pressure control solenoid valve and release the wiring harness. Remove 1 nut and 3 bolts and take out the turbocharger heat shield. Unscrew the bolt and remove the crankcase vent line. At the secondary air system non-return valve, cylinders 246, remove the 2 bolts from below. Open the quick release fitting and remove the secondary air system non-return valve. Remove the bolt for the secondary air system delivery line. At the top, on the secondary air system distributor pipe, And underneath, on the secondary air pump, unclip and remove the secondary air system delivery line. Slacken the lower bolt for the turbocharger control unit and remove the upper bolt. Detach the ventilation line. Unscrew 3 screws and remove the secondary air system line for cylinders 2, 4, 6. Detach the engine transport shackle. Disconnect the earth cable from the cylinder head. Remove the heat protection and disconnect the wiring harness plug for the coolant temperature sensor. Unclip the wiring harness and set aside. Unscrew the 13 screws and remove the cylinder head cover for cylinders 2, 4, 6. Detach the non-return valve for venting the crankcase from the cylinder head cover cylinders 1, 3, 5. Set aside the wiring trough and wiring harness. Unscrew the 13 screws and take off the cylinder head cover for cylinders 1, 3, 5. Drain the coolant and, from underneath, unclip the hydraulic line for the power steering from the front axle body. Attach the frame KM6313 to the front axle body. Fit the adapter KM6313-200 and turn the spindle in the oil pan bore until there's no play. Release the tension on the ribbed V-belt and remove from the torsional vibration damper. Using KM6330 in conjunction with KM956-1, counter-hold and release the bolt of the torsional vibration damper. With special tool KM6331-1, remove the torsional vibration damper. Release the lower bolt of the engine damping block support. Unscrew the lower 10 screws of the timing case cover. Unscrew the lower bolt of the starter wiring harness bracket from the timing case cover. From above, detach the coolant line from the coolant discharge port. Remove the 5 bolts and 1 nut and take off the right-hand engine damping block. Detach the bolt for the power steering line bracket. Remove the engine damping block support and remove the ribbed V-belt. Detach the wiring harness bracket. To remove the coolant discharge port, pull off the coolant hose, remove the 2 screws and take out the coolant discharge port. Counterhold using the special tool EN46104 to release the bolts for the coolant pump belt pulley ready for removal. Remove the 6 bolts. Place a collecting pan underneath and remove the coolant pump. Unscrew the retaining bolt for the engine damping block support. Slacken the upper bolt for the power steering pump. Remove the lower bolt. And push the power steering pump forwards. Now, the 3 bolts are accessible to enable the ribbed V-belt tensioner to be removed. Unscrew the bolt on both sides. And remove the camshaft adjustment valve. Remove the 10 upper screws of the timing case cover. Release the timing case cover and remove it. After cleaning the sealing surfaces, screw in the 2 centering bolts EN46109-2. Apply sealing compound to the cover and insert the timing case cover. To ensure the sealing bead remains undamaged, it's essential to use the centering bolts. Screw in the upper screws of the timing case cover and remove the centering bolts. Then screw in the lower screws of the timing case cover. From above, on both sides, install the camshaft adjustment valve. Install the ribbed V-belt tensioner. Fasten the power steering pump in accordance with the service literature. Fit the retaining bolt for the engine damping block support and install the cooling pump with a new gasket. Attach the coolant pump pulley. When screwing firmly in place, counter-hold with the special tool EN 46104 and tighten in accordance with the service literature. Screw the coolant discharge port firmly in place with a new gasket and attach the coolant hose. Fasten the starter wiring harness bracket at the top. Position the ribbed V-belt and install the engine damping block support. Attach the bracket for the power steering line. Install the right-hand engine damping block. Attach the coolant line with a new gasket to the coolant discharge port. From below, attach the lower bolt of the starter wiring harness bracket. Firmly tighten the underneath bolt for the engine damping block support. Place the torsional vibration damper in position. Screw in the bolt of special tool J41998B as far as the stop. And fit the torsional vibration damper by turning the nut. Firmly tighten the new bolt with torque and torque angle as stated in the service literature. Place the ribbed V-belt in position. Remove the frame. Clip the power steering oil line onto the front axle body and complete the vehicle underneath. Above, on the clean sealing surface, apply sealing compound to the interfaces of the cylinder head and timing case cover. As protection for the new gaskets of the cylinder head cover, fit the assembly sleeves EN 46101. Place the cylinder head cover 135 in position. Remove the assembly sleeves again and tighten the bolts with torque as stated in the service literature. Attach the wiring trough and wiring harness for cylinders 135. Attach the non-return valve for the crankcase venting system. Apply sealing compound to the cleaned sealing surface of cylinder head 246. Fit the assembly sleeves EN 46101. Place the cylinder head cover 246 in position. Remove the assembly sleeves again. And tighten the bolts with torque as stated in the service literature. Attach the engine wiring harness. And attach the wiring harness plug and earth cable. Attach the engine transport shackle. Install the secondary air system line for cylinders 246. And install the ventilation line. Fasten the turbocharger control unit. Install the secondary air system delivery line and screw firmly in place. Install the secondary air system non-return valve for cylinders 246 with a new gasket. Attach the crankcase vent line. Attach the turbocharger heat shield, the wiring harness plug for the charge pressure control solenoid valve, and the solenoid valve bypass. Install the battery support and battery. Remove the cloths from the intake ducts. Place a new gasket in position and install the lower part of the intake manifold. Install the fuel distributor pipe. Ensure the injectors are seated correctly. Use new seal rings. Attach the wiring harness for the injectors. Install the ignition modules on both cylinder banks. Fit the wiring harness. Fit the wiring harness on cylinder head 135. Attach the power steering reservoir with return hose. Connect the fuel supply line and attach the tank vent valve with lines. When fitting the new gasket, ensure that it's positioned correctly. Connect the throttle valve module wiring harness plug. Place the upper part of the intake manifold in position. And screw firmly in place. Attach the wiring harness bracket for the injectors. Install the bracket with the crankcase vent lines. Attach the vacuum line and the bracket for the engine wiring harness. Attach the earth connection for the engine control unit and connect the wiring harness plugs. Install the coolant return line and the charge air pipe. Clip in the power steering line and connect the charge pressure sensor wiring harness plug. Attach the upper engine cover, the air cleaner housing with air intake pipe, the intake pipe for the secondary air system, and connect the wiring harness plug for the mass air flow meter. Connect the battery, top up operating fluids, and program volatile memories. To remove the timing chains, the timing case cover must be removed. First of all, the camshafts are disconnected. To do this, using special tool EN 46111, turn the crankshaft clockwise until the flat areas of the camshafts for cylinder bank 246 are approximately parallel with the cylinder head. Place special tool EN 46105-1 EU in position. And continue turning until the special tool engages. Now, special tool EN 46105-2 EU must fit onto the camshafts of cylinder bank 135. The timing chains are attached so that they overlap. The secondary chain of cylinder bank 246 lies behind the primary chain. The secondary chain of cylinder bank 135 lies in front of the primary chain. Therefore, the timing chain of cylinder bank 135 must be removed first. To do this, remove both bolts and take out the chain tensioner with gasket. Detach the tensioning rail and the guide rail. Remove the timing chain of cylinder bank 135. The secondary chains are roller chains. To remove the primary chain, remove the tensioner with gasket and the two guide rails. Unscrew the bolt and take out the intermediate sprocket 135 with the primary chain, a toothed chain. To remove the secondary chain of cylinder bank 246, detach the tensioner, tensioning rail and guide rail, and remove the timing chain with intermediate sprocket. When replacing the timing chains, start with cylinder bank 246. The two chain sprockets have markings on them. The light-coloured links of the secondary chains are laid on these. The third light-coloured chain link is now underneath. Install the intermediate sprocket and tighten the bolt firmly with torque. Fit the guide rail. With the aid of a mirror, check that the lower light-coloured chain link is engaged in such a way that it's visible through the window in the intermediate sprocket. Then install the tensioning rail. Apply initial tension to the chain tensioner with special tool J45027 and lock. Insert the chain tensioner in the housing. And fix with EN 46112. Before assembly, ensure the gasket is seated correctly. Before the primary chain is fitted, it's necessary to check from underneath that the markings for the crankshaft sprocket and the oil pump are in alignment. Now, on the intermediate sprocket 246, the correct position of the light-coloured chain link can be checked. The marking for positioning the primary chain can be seen at the top. Place the primary chain in position. Fit the guide rails and the tensioner. To position the secondary chain of cylinder bank 135, turn the crankshaft about 115 degrees further. To do this, remove the two locking tools for the camshafts. Exchange the tools and fit special tool EN 46105-2EU to the ends of the camshafts of cylinder bank 246. Place special tool EN 46105-1EU on the ends of the camshafts of cylinder bank 135. And continue turning the camshafts until the locking tool engages. Now, the marking on the camshaft sprocket must be in alignment with the second marking on the oil pump. Place one light-coloured chain link on the triangular marking of the intake camshaft sprocket. And on the marking R of the exhaust camshaft sprocket. Fit the guide rail, tensioning rail, and the tensioner. And relieve the tension. Now the chain links must also fit on the intermediate sprocket of cylinder bank 135. To check the timing, both cylinder head covers must be removed. Remove the spark plug of cylinder 1. Screw in special tool EN 47987. Position the engine to just before TDC of cylinder 1. The flat areas of the camshafts of cylinder bank 246 are roughly horizontal. Install the dial gauge MKM 571B with an initial tension of 2 to 3 millimeters. Set the top dead center using the reversing point. Set the dial gauge to 0 and continue turning the crankshaft in the direction of rotation of the engine until the piston has moved downwards by 2 millimeters. If the timings are correct, special tool EN 46105-2 EU must fit on the camshafts of cylinder bank 135. And EN 46105-1 EU must fit on the camshafts of cylinder bank 246. To remove the turbocharger, remove the battery and the battery support. Disconnect the wiring harness plug for the solenoid valve bypass and charge pressure control solenoid valve and set the wiring harness aside. Detach the crankcase vent line, the charge pressure control vacuum line, and the ventilation line, and remove the air intake pipe. Detach the charge air pipe. Unscrew the 2 bolts and detach the coolant return line. Remove the coolant compensation tank. Remove the upper heat shield and the lower heat shield of the turbocharger. Remove the mixture control oxygen sensor and unscrew the 3 nuts. Detach the catalytic converter from the cylinder head. From below, detach the exhaust gas system from the catalytic converter. Unscrew the 4 screws and detach the 2 brackets of the catalytic converter. From above, detach the 2 gearbox actuation cables. After removing 3 nuts, unscrew 1 further bolt and remove the bracket for the gearbox cables. Remove the main brake cylinder heat shield. Take out the catalytic converter control oxygen sensor and lift out the catalytic converter upwards. Seal the turbocharger with special tool EN 47983. Detach the heat shield for the exhaust manifold cylinder bank 135. Unscrew 2 nuts from the connecting pipe on the turbocharger. Unscrew 3 nuts on the exhaust manifold and remove the connecting pipe. Dismantle the front panelling. Detach the air intake pipe and pull the coolant hose off the coolant discharge port. From above, suspend the cooling module, detach the power steering hydraulic line and fix. Detach the cooling module bracket and push the cooling module towards the front. Disconnect the wiring harness plug from the secondary air pump. Pull off the air intake pipe and the delivery line. Unclip the coolant line. Unscrew the 2 bolts and remove the secondary air pump. From above, remove the air intake pipe and the secondary air delivery line. Remove the bolt and take out the oil dipstick guide tube. Remove the upper part of the charge air connection pipe and the 2 upper fastening bolts of the connection pipe. Remove the upper bolt of the heat shield. From underneath, detach the charge air hose from the charge air connection pipe. Unscrew the bolt and remove the charge air connection pipe. Unscrew and remove the 3 lower bolts for the heat shield and take out the heat shield. Remove the bolt for the turbocharger oil supply line bracket. And unscrew the banjo bolt of the oil supply from the oil filter housing. From above, detach the oil supply line from the turbocharger. Unscrew the 3 nuts from the exhaust manifold connection pipe and remove the bolt plate. Remove the bolt for the coolant supply and the bolts for the oil return. Unscrew the fastening bolt for the turbocharger and withdraw the turbocharger upwards. When installing the turbocharger, ensure that the coolant supply and oil return lines are seated correctly. Attach the fastening bolt for the turbocharger and the bolts for the oil return and the coolant supply. Use new gaskets in each case. Attach the 3 nuts for the exhaust manifold connection pipe. Attach the oil supply line to the turbocharger and from below install the oil filter housing. Fasten the oil supply pipe bracket. Fit the heat shield. Attach the charge air connection pipe and the charge air hose. From above, screw in the upper bolt of the heat shield. Attach the 2 fastening bolts and the upper part of the charge air connection pipe. Install the oil dipstick guide tube and the secondary air delivery line and fit the air intake pipe. Attach the secondary air pump. Fit the cooling module bracket, the power steering hydraulic oil line, and the cooling module. Connect the coolant hose to the coolant discharge port and attach the air intake pipe. Mount the front panelling. Attach the heat shield for the exhaust manifold cylinder bank 135. Fit the connection pipe to the exhaust manifold and to the turbocharger. Remove the special tool EN 47983 and insert the catalytic converter. Install the catalytic converter control oxygen sensor. Attach the main brake cylinder heat shield, the bracket for the gearbox cables, and the two gearbox cables. From underneath, fit the two catalytic converter brackets and the exhaust system. From above, attach the catalytic converter to the cylinder head. Coat the stud bolts with special grease and screw the catalytic converter firmly in place. Screw in the mixture control oxygen sensor. Attach the lower heat shield of the turbocharger and the upper heat shield. Attach the coolant compensation tank and the coolant return line. Install the charge air pipe, the air intake pipe, the ventilation line, the charge pressure control vacuum line, and the crankcase vent line. Connect the wiring harness plugs for the solenoid valve bypass and charge pressure control solenoid valve. Install the battery support and the battery. Top up operating fluids and program volatile memories. The rear crankshaft seal ring is permanently connected to the housing cover. If it has to be replaced, unscrew the bolts and take off the cover. When undertaking cleaning work, make sure no residues enter the oil pan. The groove must be cleaned particularly well. Apply sealing compound to the new cover and to the groove. Ensure that the groove is completely filled and the bead remains flat. Attach special tool EN 47839. Caution: the seal ring is very sensitive. Do not touch it under any circumstances. Place the new cover in position. And tighten the bolts crosswise. Remove the special tool again. Advanced technology, excellent performance and torque specifications. The Z28 NEL NET, an engine for vehicles of the executive and high performance class.